Spaces dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here, November 26th. Let's get into this. Silly season is ramping up in a big way. The waiver draft took place yesterday. Re-entry is today. We're already getting rumors of free agents signing with MLS clubs. Free agency is now open as well. Players are demanding trades around the league. Players are unhappy with their contracts. It's that time of year, and this is very common, and we'll get into all of it this morning. Tweet your questions at us, your Tuesday thoughts at Soccer Down here. My thought is John will get his phone working eventually, and he will join us. Don't know when that'll be. Could be in the next 60 seconds. Could be in the next 5 minutes. Who knows? He'll be with us eventually, though. We'll get into that as we go. Let me catch you guys up on things that happened yesterday, because we did have some concrete moves. We had some players that re-signed ahead of the waiver draft and ahead of free agency opening. Uri Rosell was the one that jumped out to me the most. 2-year deal with Orlando City to remain in Central Florida. He's a player that I think would have been in high demand around the league. I think Rosell still has a whole lot to give, and we'll see if whoever the new manager is in Orlando can get that out of him. And now you have Oscar Pareja, who is out in Tijuana. And all of the conversation had been that Oscar Pareja would be coming to Orlando. He wanted to finish out the season. He wanted to see if he could get Xolos into the Liguilla in Mexico. Didn't happen. Is Orlando next? That would seem to be the obvious thing. But Taylor Twellman tweeted out that another team was interested too. And there's a few other very intriguing jobs. Does Orlando have a deal in place, or do they have to maybe get into a bit of a bidding war with Senor Pareja? Pareja, I think, is a manager who will have great success in MLS when he comes back. I think the opportunity to go to Tijuana was a good one for him. I think it was an opportunity that maybe didn't pan all the way out. Tijuana is a club that is not all that financially viable, and that can hold them back at times. Pareja is a manager who was interviewed for the U.S. men's national team job that Greg Berhalter ended up getting. He's won an Open Cup. He's won a Supporters Shield with FC Dallas. And most importantly, and I think maybe with the time that is happening now, maybe it's lost in the shuffle a bit, but Pareja really put together what is now one of the best academies in the United States in Dallas. It was Pareja first as the academy director when Shellis Heineman was the manager at Dallas. And then when he came back to be in charge of the first team after going to Colorado for a bit, it was putting Luchi Gonzalez into that role and continuing the growth that Pareja started. So wherever he goes, I think those are some things you're going to be looking for. A team with young talent, a team that needs to grow its academy, or a team that already has a strong academy that Pareja can use those riches to build a team. And there's one team out there that you have to look at that would be very intriguing if Oscar Pareja was to end up there, and it's Real Salt Lake. When you look at the young talent that RSL has, when you look at the strength of their academy as it's currently constructed, that feels like a really good fit and a similar type of fit to what Pareja had in Dallas. Is that the challenge you would want? Does he already have a deal in place with his former compatriot Luis Muzzi from Dallas, who's in Orlando? We'll have to wait and see. But Pareja, where he ends up on the coaching carousel, is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Other players who were re-signed yesterday, Colorado Rapids, Nicolas Mesquita and Andre Rawls were signed to new contracts, both for 2 years. Tony Roca was signed to a new deal for New York City FC. New England Revolution, a little bit of a surprise, re-signed defender Michael Mancian to a renegotiated contract, is what the press release said. Mancian was on one of the highest salaries for a center back in Major League Soccer, and he really hasn't delivered on that. Injuries took him out of the lineup in 2019. I'd love to know what that renegotiated contract looks like. Does that number come down? Does it take him under the TAM threshold? Does he stay as a designated player? It really wasn't mentioned in the press release, and you don't have to define that as of yet because New England will have the opportunity to make other moves that you might decide to TAM him, you might not need to, and you might keep him as a designated player. So we'll wait and see there. There were 4 players that were picked up in the waiver process. Let's work from the back to the front. So the LA Galaxy picked up the last player, Danilo Acosta. Young player who had a good 2018, not a great 2019. Very inconsistent, but very talented. Would like to see what he ends up turning into with the LA Galaxy and Guillermo Barros Escaloto. Minnesota and New England picked up goalkeepers. Minnesota picked up Greg Ranjit-Singh, former Louisville City goalkeeper, was with Orlando last year, Trinidad and Tobago international. New England traded up in the waiver draft. They had to give up a super draft pick to get up to number 3 so they could go get Jeff Caldwell, who was formerly with New York City FC, 2-year pro. And the big surprise was number 1, where Cincinnati picked Harris Medunjanin. Are they going to sign Harris Medunjanin? Is he going to want to go to Cincinnati? Big questions on that side of it. The clubs have to make a genuine offer to these players. But Medunjanin stepping into Cincinnati, a lot of talk about what he brings you defensively, which isn't a ton. But what he brings you in possession is very, very important. And Ron Jans, coming from the Netherlands, I think we saw very slight glimpses of what he would like that team to be at the end of last season. And possession would be a big part of it. And I think Medunjanin, if they can come to terms, if they can find the numbers that make sense, and he's willing to take on that challenge, because it is a challenge, Medunjanin could be a really good fit for what Ron Jans wants to do. Now, you're going to need somebody who can pick up the defensive slack for him, of course, but what he can do on the ball would be a very vital part of what Jans is trying to implement in Cincinnati. Those are the moves that are official. Those are the moves that have happened so far. Today, 3 o'clock, the reentry process starts. Now remember, this is 2 stages where these are players who did not qualify for free agency but had more time in the league than the waiver process. So players who are 23 and have a minimum of 3 years of experience whose contract options were not exercised, or players who are at least 25 with a minimum of 4 years of MLS experience who are out of contract and the club did not wish to re-sign them at their previous salary. So those guys are available for at least their 2019 salary. You have to basically roll the contract over another year if you pick players who are in that category. If you pick players whose options were not exercised, you have to pick up their option. That's how today's stage 1 of the reentry draft goes. Miami traded for the first pick in that Victor Ulloa deal, so Miami has the first pick of who's available. If players aren't picked here, they go into stage 2, which will be next week. And it's more like the waiver process where you pick up a player and then you have to make a genuine offer to the player within 7 days. That's how that one will work. But today, you're picking up contracts. So will you see a lot of movement today? Probably not. But there are some players that I could see going. And Miami moving up to get that first pick makes you think that either there's a player that they want, or they figured there would be a player that they wanted, or they want to shop that basically to anybody else who's behind them and say, oh, you want this player? Well, we're going to take him instead, so you're going to have to give us something. We'll see how Paul McDonough uses that. I'm very curious to see who they pick up. We'll get into the list a little bit and players who could be interesting for Miami, for Nashville, for other teams that have a lot of needs. The reentry draft can be something that can be useful to teams. It can help remake teams because there is a lot of talent in it this time around. But is that talent going to have to wait until stage 2? That's the question that I have. We've had a lot of questions on Twitter, and we'll get into it. the Julian Gressel interview that was posted at The Athletic. Let's jump into that right now. ATL UTD fan number 1 said, "For me, Julian Gressel playing this out through the media, it's almost like what happened with us during the All-Star break is unnecessary. I know he's eager since Robinson signed already, but taking this route isn't wise in ATL UTD fan number 1's opinion. Come on, Julian Gressel, your day is coming." It was a little surprising to see the level of that conversation that was in The Athletic. I was a little surprised at how strong it was. I would like to know when that interview took place, if it was very recent or if it had been in the can for just a little bit. It's going to be difficult because this comes up. I mean, this is nothing new. It's not like this is a unique situation in sports where you have a player who outperforms a contract, and you have to manage all sides of this, and you have to put your feet in the shoes of the player and of the club as to what makes sense here. The CBA negotiation is a big part of it. Gressel downplayed it in the interview, but I think without knowing what cap numbers look like, without knowing what other rules could change, it is a risk to sign players to long-term deals right now. I'm wondering if this is going to affect the free agency market. I'm wondering if this is going to affect what teams do today in the reentry process. I'm very curious to see when the international transfer window opens, what teams do out in the market. Because, I mean, it's a safe assumption to work from the position that you're not going to be working with less. You're not going to be working with a smaller cap. You're not going to be working with less DP spots. You're not going to be working with less TAM, GAM, what have you. It's a safe assumption to say you're going to be working with more. But how much more? And do you get the bigger changes that the players are calling for, which would mean dumping all of the allocation money, and they don't like TAM, period, but then dumping allocation money into the salary cap and just working from there? Is there a compromise? Is there other changes that can happen? It's very difficult to make big moves at the moment with this type of situation. So I understand the club's position completely. Obviously, it's easy to understand Julian Gressel's position. He's had a great 3 years. He's been very impactful in this team. The question is weighing what that impact turns into when it comes to salary and effect on the cap. And that's always going to be a struggle for any team in a salary cap league. How many times do you see a team that builds a young team, players come around to contract time, and it's hard to keep that team together? It just is. It's the difficulties of a salary cap system. So this is going to happen more often. This is Atlanta United's first major taste of this, and it's been a little surprising how much of it is played out in the media. We'll see how that continues. We'll see how that looks over time. But give us your thoughts. Let us know on Twitter what you're thinking about this, about other moves that are happening in MLS silly season. It's completely and utterly upon us right now. The rumors that are floating out there, the talk that's out there, the speculation that's out there. And it's kind of fun in a lot of ways because this is the conversation that drives the sport in many countries around the world. I think the level and maybe the depth of the conversation around silly season has grown a lot in recent years in Major League Soccer, and it's only going to continue to do so. It could grow a lot more this time around. So stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to see if we can find John, or maybe he can make his phone work. We'll figure that out. But we'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Everybody's here. John has a working phone.
Updated phone. And this will be my question for Tuesday Thoughts. When was the last time you, in the collective, screamed at an inanimate object for it to finish doing what it was supposed to not do at the most inconvenient time possible?
You and technology, man.
Yeah. This is not necessarily news. This is just the most recent update in John's battles with technology. 8:58, my phone decides it's going to update. And it took 17 minutes. You'd think that technology would know how to update slightly faster than 17 minutes.
Ay. All right.
So there was that this morning.
Yeah. It's okay. Your phone's working now, I guess. Kind of, sort of.
I guess.
All right. So, coming up later today on the SDH network, we will have an Aberdeen special. So, we'll get you all caught up on everything about this partnership, featuring an interview that I had this morning with Derek Ray,
Nice.
Originally from Aberdeen, and had great insight on Aberdeen as a club and things that he sees about this partnership that are going to benefit both sides. And one person we talked about, and it's an anniversary today for this person, was Atlanta United 2 manager Stephen Glass. On this day in 1995, Aberdeen won the Coca-Cola Cup, which was the League Cup sponsor at the time, and Stephen Glass was named Man of the Match. And his Man of the Match prize is the greatest Man of the Match prize of all Man of the Match prizes. A bike.
Like a 10-speed or a Schwinn or a 3-speed or what?
I mean, I don't have the specs on the bike, John. I don't know what Coca-Cola provided to him, but it was a bicycle.
That's awesome.
We'll have to ask Glassy what kind of bike he got, if he's still got it.
Yes, if he still got it.
Yeah, but Glassy came up at Aberdeen. That was where he broke through as a professional, and obviously very, very fond memories of his time there. He posted, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet because it came through in the last segment, a clip from that game. Ali Beg posted it on Twitter, but very cool to see all the connections. We talked about, the historical connections yesterday between, Lithonia and Aberdeen and the original days of soccer in Atlanta. Willie McIntosh playing for the Chiefs, who played for Aberdeen. Now you have John Gallagher on loan over at Aberdeen. Glassy's a big part of that. It's very, very cool to see this relationship. And that was something that we talked about with Derek this morning. It's something that will be cool to see in the summer because I'm sure it's going to happen this year. Aberdeen fans coming over for a weekend in Atlanta to see an Atlanta United game and be part of the process. And I do think you're going to see it the other way, too. I think you're going to see Atlanta fans who go over to Aberdeen for a match. And building that relationship between the fans, just the camaraderie of it, it's always a really cool thing about the sport.
Okay, Ricky Ricardo seems to have found a photo of the bicycle.
There's photos. It's not that hard to find, yes.
That's and the closed wheel, that's pretty good. But no, I mean, when we were talking about it yesterday and we're talking about it today, I mean, to me, this is a pretty big freaking deal. And I'd like to see the national media pick up on this and understand that, no, this is not, an American takeover of another club overseas. This is a partnership. This is something where both sides saw something that could be mutually beneficial for one reason or another when it comes to the relationships that Aberdeen has in looking at talent in Europe and what Atlanta United has been doing in South America. You sit there and both sides can learn from that. And both sides can learn from how Aberdeen can learn from how Atlanta United has been getting fan interaction, fan involvement, folks engaged, and those kinds of things. And for this to be this kind of relationship where you have an MLS club reaching out and joining a team that has the history that Aberdeen does, for me, this has just maintained itself as a pretty big freaking deal ever since it came across the wires.
Yeah, I think it's something that will end up benefiting both sides of it, and we'll keep digging into it as it evolves. Both David Cormack and Darren Eales spoke yesterday about the next 90 days. They'll really be figuring out some of those next steps and what things look like as Aberdeen prepares to build a stadium or potentially redevelop where they're at. But I think they want to build a new one. And Atlanta United looks to continue to grow. And I think there's things for both sides to learn. So really excited about where this goes. We'll continue the whole, kind of building of the relationship. It's going to be very cool to see how this grows. Share your thoughts on it with us on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. Anything else on your mind on a Tuesday Thoughts? It's pretty much fair game on where you want to go. Eric Schwartz has a question that John, I want to ask you. Christian Nemeth is a player that is available in this offseason in Major League Soccer. 30 years old, salary right around $1 million. Do you think he finds a home in MLS, or do you think he tries to make a move internationally again?
Well, for me, the first thing that I'm staring at is the $1 million salary. And for me, I was looking at the names yesterday that were selected in the draft, and Nemeth being available for the various stages that we have in the next couple of days. For me, it would have to be, you look at what he did and didn't do at Sporting. For me, it would have to be, okay, if you want to come in, you're...
8 goals in 1,500 minutes. What's wrong with that?
I'm looking at age and I'm looking at salary, and it would have to be fit. It would have to be the right fit for me in MLS anyway. And I'm trying to figure out who off the top of my head would have the kind of financial space to drop that kind of money. And, if you're 30 years old, I know that you put in 8 goals, but could you accept a role if you wanted to play for a team chasing a title? Could you accept a bit of a lesser role somewhere and take less salary than you made last season? Those are, for me, yeah, I know he scored what he scored, but I'm looking at age and I'm looking at salary. It might have to be less salary and a lesser role someplace if he wants to chase a championship, or do you want to start someplace? That would be my 2 questions.
It's the balance. Nemeth is at that stage in his career. The last few years, 2018, he did have some injuries. He bounced back and forth between 2 teams. He was in New England and moved to Kansas City. He only started 8 matches total. Last year, he started 18, had some injuries as well. Is he a guy that you can count on to be a number 9 and play 30 times, start 30
25
games?
to 30, yeah.
Can he get you 24 to 2,500 minutes in a season? if he can, there are some teams that are looking for a forward that can get you double-digit goals. Montreal would be one that stands out to me. Minnesota would be one that I think is a potential landing spot. The LA Galaxy, if they don't decide to go international with that. And the Galaxy, the one thing to remember about the Galaxy is, as they're currently constructed, if Roman Alessandrini comes back, they don't have a designated player spot because Christian Pavone has moved into that spot this year. That's the spot that was vacated with Zlatan Ibrahimovic leaving. So they don't have the potential to go out and get a big international designated player number 9. Do they change that possibility? Potentially. They very well could when it comes to Alessandrini. Or do they decide to go get a number 9 in the league? And Nemeth would be one that I think you have to consider. That's the starting level number 9. But teams that have the need for a backup number 9, as Gwen gets really excited about Christian Nemeth.
Yes.
You've got some teams that do have the need for depth up top. And is that going to be a better spot for a Nemeth? I think he's going to have to take less money for that kind of role, because then you're not asking him to start 30 times 40. You're asking him to start 10 to 12. Can you find the numbers that make sense? And I think the biggest thing here with a player like Nemeth is MLS going to be his best landing spot? Is he going to be able to find more money elsewhere for either more time or more money to be in a secondary role? That worldwide market with players at this level can be a challenge for MLS teams, because there could be the competition for more money elsewhere. And we'll have to wait and see. But he's a talented player if he's healthy. And that's going to be my number one question, is just how much can he give you, because it's hard to figure out if he's a starter or a first off the bench right now.
And for me, like I said, I was looking at age, I was looking at salary figure, and then with everything that is processed through the points that you were discussing, it's like, okay, do you take less money knowing that you're going to start less, or do you still think that you have the capability to be healthy, do more than 18, be there for 25 to 30, or let's say 75 to 80% of whatever league's matches you would be pursuing, and then trying to figure out, okay, I still think I have it, therefore I think I should chase after this salary figure here, or here. So those are the big things.
It's a player who's in that in-between kind of spot, so it's a little difficult to project, and it's just going to depend on if a team is willing to give him the money and the type of spot to be a starter, and that's going to be the key. Shiva with a question, going back to the Julian Gressel interview in The Athletic. Shiva said, I definitely think Gressel chose very strong words to describe his frustration. It was unnecessary. But can you please explain why Miles has gotten a contract and Gressel has not? Trying to understand why Gressel's contract is affected by the CBA, why Miles did not. A couple things on Miles that are different in the situation. So Miles Robinson was part of the Generation Adidas program. He was going to graduate that program at the end of the year, and he ultimately did once they announced it and let everybody know how that process was working. But the fact that he was a regular starter this year, they knew he would be graduating it. So you have to come up to a new deal because he's going to be on your books at that point. The other thing about the Robinson deal when it was announced, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember anything about that deal going over the TAM or over the maximum player threshold. I think when we talk about maximum salary threshold, I think when we talk about this stuff, you have to think about the max salary cap hit, because when you're above that, then they're either a designated player or you're using TAM or GAM to buy them down under that number. And generally, when contracts are announced, that you're announcing that you're making the move using TAM or GAM at the time. That was why when I talked about Michael Mancien's renegotiated contract, as New England put it, they didn't specify that. So I'm wondering if his salary number has come down a good bit to where you won't need to use TAM on him, or he's not a designated player either way. Robinson, that Generation Adidas part completely changed the paradigm with him, but I'm also wondering what his salary number is. Does it put him above that threshold? If it doesn't, it's a much more cut and dried move. If it does, then it's completely the Generation Adidas designation that would make it different. I think it's a safe assumption that Julian Gressel is likely going to be above that threshold with his next contract. I think that's a safe number to start from when you start talking about this negotiation. But how far above it? And that is a more complicated situation.
Right. And when Miles' contract was, when you got the extension to 2023, for me, I initially was thinking, okay, he's going to be graduating programs. You have to jump on this so there isn't any discussion from any other team, any other league on this planet or any other that Miles would be available one way or another when a contract is over. So I thought that Atlanta United was capitalizing on a timetable to make sure that they had Miles under wraps, where in the situation with Julian, it's more of a CBA-based thing as opposed to Miles when he's coming through Generation Adidas.
Miles wasn't going to be out of contract. Don't confuse that part of it. He was going to be out of Generation Adidas, but you would have retained an option there. You're not going to create a program like Generation Adidas and have guys when they graduate it be out of contract and then have the potential for somebody else to swoop in. That's not it. It's just you're talking about a completely different designation. More importantly, you're talking about a player who's going to be on your books at that point. So you've got to get things nailed down. Going back to the press release, there is nothing specific about any kind of mechanisms on that contract. So if he's under that maximum cap hit number, and that was $530,000 this year, and don't know what it will be next year, don't know if there was a negotiated escalator in case they just continue under the terms of the CBA while they're negotiating, don't know. You would expect that it would be higher going forward, but how much, again, is a question. But if he's under what it was this year, and you're not worried about signing him to a TAM level deal or using GAM to buy him down or anything like that, it's really not a deal that is dependent on the CBA. And I hope that's understood, because if the CBA is affecting Gressel's conversation, you could be getting into numbers that are going to involve GAM, TAM, what have you, and maximum cap hits and all those sorts of things. And that is a CBA effect. Robinson, without knowing what that number is, we're speculating, but the fact that nothing was mentioned about allocation money in his new deal would make you think that it's just much more of a cut and dried, simple renegotiation, new deal, extended deal through 2023.
And Tafka comes in and says the other issue, Robinson didn't have an option year from what he had heard. That alone forces the Robinson deal.
I don't think that's the case. No, I don't think that's the case at all. And nobody said he didn't have an option year. Nobody said Miles Robinson was coming out of contract, because teams could have lined up to sign him in the summer window. I don't think that's the case. Generally, Generation Adidas isn't structured that way. I think it's more about the fact that Generation Adidas designation was going away, and he was going to be on your books, and you were going to have to sign him to a new deal at that point. So you did, and you were proactive about it.
A couple of other folks on the timeline this morning have been mentioning another player when it comes to the reentry process and possibly picking him up for Atlanta United. BWP has been a question this morning on the timeline.
There was a report, and I don't know if it necessarily checked out of New England, that the Revolution talked to BWP, and I mean, in the report, this is what doesn't check out. They said they opted not to sign him because of concern about injuries. Well, they couldn't. He goes through the reentry process. So if they opted not to select him, that's a different conversation. That process starts today. There is a question about his injury situation. Was he healthy for the Red Bulls last season and they opted not to use him? Was he not healthy? Did he have a massive dip in form? Did injuries affect it? It's a risky move, and the question is going to be, I think, even more pronounced than it is for a player like Nemeth about role. You know, is he a player who wants to start? Because then the same clubs we talked about are the clubs that you're going to think about. And I think one obvious one that you're going to think about is Montreal. Because Thierry Henry, Bradley Wright Phillips, the Red Bulls connections, you know, is that something that you would want to revisit? Is that something that you would want to make? And Montreal has a spot. They need a number 9 that can put the ball in the back of the net. They haven't had that in a while. Is BWP that guy? Is Nemeth that guy? Is Juan Agudelo that guy? Is somebody from overseas that guy? We'll have to wait and see. But the same destinations are the same ones you're going to talk about with Bradley Wright Phillips. I think the role that Atlanta is looking for is maybe not the greatest fit when it comes to BWP. I don't know how comfortable he would be in that backup role coming off the bench, and then what does he give you that is different than Joseph Martinez? I mean, he's obviously not going to give you the explosiveness that Joseph gives you, but he's not necessarily the larger target forward that would give you a very different perspective up top. So I don't know if he's a fit here, and especially the type of money that he could command even as a reserve. The question is going to be his health. That's the number one thing for me, is how much can he give you based off of what happened last year? Because even when he was in matches last year, he did not look the same. And it was the first time that had been the case. With a year of not a ton of activity, does that change? Potentially. There's also Father Time to deal with.
I mean, when you were mentioning that, the Marcus Allen example kind of popped into my head a little bit, where, and it was out of just dislike that Al Davis didn't play Marcus Allen for 2 years with his time with the Raiders. He goes to Kansas City, has a renaissance because he didn't get all those reps, and his body had a chance to heal up. So, you know, is it something like that where because of the activity that you didn't have in 2019, your body's going to respond in 2020 and you'll be back to past levels? But I mean, as we all know, and I always say, Father Time is undefeated. So it's just something that we have to look at come the early part of training camps and who wants to take a leap on BWP. Yeah,
keep an eye on the Montreal connection, because Henry and BWP overlapped for about 18 months in New York. When Bradley Wright Phillips arrived midseason 2013, played 7 matches, started 4. Then they played together in the 2014 season where Wright Phillips scored 27 goals. Thierry Henry assisted on 14, not all of those to BWP, but quite a few. So that's a connection that, you know, with Thierry Henry coming into Montreal, does he lean on someone in the league that he knows, even if it is as more of a reserve role? And would Bradley Wright Phillips then be moved to go play for Thierry Henry and help him in his new project? It'd be an interesting landing spot.
Joshua Jones this morning has another Red Bull to bring into the discussion. He says, with Tito's blessing, of course, Atlanta United should absolutely pursue Kemar Lawrence. We immediately become a better team. Imagine him and LGP on the left side of the back line.
No, I completely disagree, because you have George Bello there, and you're not going to bring in a roadblock to George Bello's development. It's just not going to happen. Kemar Lawrence has reportedly, according to Soccer by Ivis, requested a trade from the New York Red Bulls. According to SBI Soccer, the Red Bulls have refused the request to renegotiate his contract. They are not under an obligation to do it because they've got 2 more guaranteed years and an option after that. So that would mean he's under contract for 20, he's under contract for 21. We've got an option on 22. Kemar Lawrence might hold out to try to force a trade or force a renegotiation. And a source told SBI Soccer that the Red Bulls are not looking to shop Kemar Lawrence. But coming here, that's not going to make sense because of George Bello. And these are the things when you're building a club that you have to keep in mind. You're trying to develop your own talent, and you don't want to create roadblocks for that talent when they're ready. And George Bello is ready. The fact that he started in Costa Rica in the CONCACAF Champions League on day one for Frank de Boer tells you that they think highly of him. The groin injury that was a reoccurrence from an injury that happened in 2018 for him. He had surgery to correct it. He played regularly with Atlanta United 2 at the end of the season because by that point, you weren't going to change things around that were working at the first team to try to reincorporate him. He went to the U17 World Cup for the U.S. He's a player that I think you're going to count on from day one next year. So you don't want to bring in a player like Kemar Lawrence, who would start for most teams in the league, to block a young talent that could end up being better than Kemar Lawrence. You don't want to stunt that development. And it's a big process with developing players. And there is always that balance of the here and now and the future. But Bello is one that I think can give you both. I think he can continue to develop and get even better. But I think he's a player that can be a starter for you in 2020, day one.
Expansion question from Ricky Ricardo.
Okay.
With the rise of the Canadian Premier League, do you think there will ever be a fourth Canadian MLS team? Haven't heard any rumors when it comes to possible expansion teams in the immediate, but interested to know if there are potential cities for it.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a city that would make sense to jump over the American cities that don't have a team. I just don't think there's one large enough that would provide enough to the league to do it when you have Charlotte ready to go, you have Vegas, you have San Diego, you have Raleigh, you have Tampa, you have Phoenix, you have Detroit. There's so many markets that if you continue to expand are going to be interested on the American side of it. I don't know if the Ottawas or Edmontons or Calgarys would really be able to compete with that.
For me, it would have been Ottawa because of what they had done with the Fury and where they play at TD Place. But with everything that they were going through and not playing this year because of all of the fighting going on in and around Ottawa and the governing body in Canada, that would have been my only thought. But Ottawa for me is so far behind the American cities that are chasing after expansion bids right now. I would say no.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen at all.
Andy Hollums has linked to an MLS Buzz piece. 18-year-old Colombian defensive midfielder Andres Pareja has an offer from an unnamed MLS team born in Tampa, raised in Colombia. Andy says, defensive midfielder Osorio said he might be coming to MLS. He only follows one MLS club on Twitter. South American pipeline to Atlanta United, ?
You never know. The fact that he was born in Tampa is huge when you start talking about a move to the United States, because then you're not talking about an international spot. Very young, unproven, hasn't had a ton of action. He hasn't played a lot lately, and that kind of sparked the conversation that, okay, what's going on here? And that was where Osorio said that he could have an offer from the United States. There's speculation that they've been keeping him out of the team because of an impending move. So that American citizenship, being born in Tampa, is critical here because you have a player who has been an up-and-coming young talent in the Colombian league, but he's not going to count as an international. So keep an eye on that one. That's an intriguing one. Now, is a player like that ready to step into a top MLS team straight away? It's a question mark. It's not a definite yes. It's not a definite no. You have to see the player. We've seen South American players of this age come into MLS and do well straight out of the gates. We've seen some take time to adapt. You want a solid core around a player like that to be able to give them a good landing spot. Atlanta has that. Other teams have that. Who would be the team that's in for him? We'll have to wait and see. But Pareja, it's an interesting one. And just the fact that you're not taking up an international slot makes that a far less risky move.
Apparently, continuing what MLS Buzz was saying this morning, Nacional manager Juan Carlos Osorio was in the airport this morning before catching a flight for his club's next match. Quote, Andres Pareja is not coming because he's possibly going to MLS.
Yep. And that's all over the Colombian media at the moment. It's everywhere. So very intrigued to see where he ends up. That lack of an international slot that's needed for him, it's a no-brainer to go get a player like that. And this was something that, years ago, my friend Ricardo Montoya and I were, looking at players who could be interesting for MLS teams. And those were the types of players that you had to put a premium on it, in our opinion. And I think it's still the case. Because if you can get a player who has that type of seasoning but doesn't take the international slot, who's a dual national, you're crazy not to look at it. It's such a benefit when it works out well, that go for it. I mean, I think, you look at the first signing Atlanta United ever made, and it was a player that fit into that conversation, and Alex Tambakis, who had the experience in Greece but was a domestic player. And that was really important. And you take a flyer on players like that. I think the level that Pareja is on is a different conversation here altogether. And smart move. So where he ends up, we'll have to find out.
James McClatchy, he said he'd like to hear more about the Nagbe replacement. It appears the replacement cannot be a DP. Feels like a huge hole. Are we just counting on Remedi?
I think Emerson Hyndman's in that conversation as much as anybody. Remember when you talk about DP, like this is something when you talk about designated player slots, and it can't be a designated player. I mean, technically, if you didn't buy him down, Darlington Nagbe was a designated player. So when you just look at the current type of cap, and again, CBA, you don't know how this looks differently, but let's take what you have to work with right now. You take Nagbe out of that slot in your cap, and you have an opportunity to put somebody in. If you're going to keep Emerson Hyndman, you're probably talking around that range. Because I believe he counted 350 against the cap for you this year, and I don't know if that was prorated or not. You're going to have to, unless Bournemouth is just willing to let him go because he's out of contract there in June, unless they're willing to do the loan through the rest of his deal there, and then you have to sign him to a new deal. And you could sign that deal, remember, when you're 6 months before your contract expires, you can sign a pre-contract. So technically the way you could make this work is if he plays out his deal with Bournemouth on loan in Atlanta, and then his new contract takes effect at the beginning of the summer window, and you don't lose any time. He's with you the whole season, but kind of under two different situations. You might be able to kind of massage the cap in a way that's really beneficial for you when it comes to Emerson Hyndman. You are going to have Miles Robinson on the cap, where he wasn't before because he was on the supplemental reserve side as a Generation Adidas player. Mo Adams will be on your cap in a spot, one of the more reserve type of roles on your senior roster. That's an easy transition from some of the players who are moving on. But when you start talking about replacements, or you go back to the Gressel conversation and you start figuring out where those numbers work, that's where it gets challenging. And that's where you have to dig a little bit deeper and where it can go. I think on the field right now, Emerson Hyndman can be the Nagbe replacement. Remedi can be the Nagbe replacement. It could be one sometimes. It could be the other sometimes. The bigger question for me is the 6. Is Jeff Larentowicz coming back? Does Frank DeBoer see Eric Remedi as a number 6 in the long run? Can he see a midfield that works for him with Remedi and Hyndman together? We saw Remedi and Nagbe together some. Could you see Remedi and Hyndman together? Would that work? How much have we seen of that duo in training sessions? Are they comfortable with that? Or do you need to go make a move to get in somebody else to play with one of those two? Or can you play all three together in a 4-3-3 and then play Pitti and Barco out wide, or Gressel and Barco, or Gressel and Pitti, or whatever combination you go with there? It's the challenges of having a lot of depth and the challenges of having a lot of different options. So the number 6 part of it is the more important one for me as to what Atlanta does. I think you have some different ways you can replace Nagbe, and I'll go back to what DeBoer and Bocanegra said at their media availability recently. Nagbe's not necessarily a player that you replace like for like. Like, there's not exactly that kind of player for him. But can you replace him in the way a team plays? Yes. And it might look a little different because of that.
And then Tafka, yesterday afternoon, he said that in nailing the Nagbe trade numbers, he had a prediction/conspiracy theory at the time.
He thinks he's nailed the Nagbe trade numbers. Calm down. And he's got conspiracy theories, so put on your tinfoil hats.
He says the Atlanta front office knows the league is considering a Larry Bird rule as a part of their concessions toward reaching a new CBA.
Yeah. I think I hear black helicopters off in the distance. Look, I mean, who knows how they end up dealing with it. That's a very specific bit of speculation, but the CBA, it is going to look different. At a minimum, it's a safe assumption to say that there's going to be more money to work with to bring in players. What the mechanisms are, what the negotiated mechanisms are, that's the part that you just don't know yet. Is it just an increased cap, everything continues the way it is? Is it a gradual elimination of TAM? Is it moving GAM into the cap? Is it changing player restrictions? Is it changing the way using TAM to re-sign players works? What is it exactly? And these are the things we just don't know yet. That type of rule would be a very big step. I think it's a rule that would make a ton of sense. I think it's a rule that would really benefit the league as it grows, to give teams an opportunity to spend more money than the cap, which is something that you want to do as the league grows for teams that want to do it. And it's in a very strategic way to retain talent. If you develop players and they continue to grow and they continue to deserve more money, that's why the NBA created that kind of rule. You could go above the cap to sign your own players. Now, I think ultimately over time they created some restrictions on it, and they dialed it back in just a little bit, and makes sense. I can see that because you can abuse that. It's very easy to abuse it. But that kind of rule, in my opinion, would be something that the players would like, because one of their major criticisms has been about the way TAM incentivizes teams to go outside the league to bring players in, as opposed to re-signing players from within the league who are already here. So if you created this kind of setup, then you would then be incentivizing teams to re-sign players that are already here. Makes sense. Would seem to fit what the players are looking for. Is it something that's going to get agreed to? Who knows? Is it something that is already going to happen, as Tafka tells you? Again, I hear the black helicopters off in the distance. I don't know about that.
We were officially caught up on the Twitters for hour number 1. Is there anything else you want to hit before we head to hour number 2?
A couple different rumors. We mentioned the one with Pareja. You have El Periódico de Aragón in Spain, which is reporting that New York City wants to sign Georgian winger Georgi Papanushvili, but luckily he goes by the nickname Papu. I was
going to say.
24-year-old plays for Real Zaragoza and second division in Spain. MLS club and the player are interested in making a deal, but the report in Spain claims that recent changes at New York City, Claudio Reyna leaving, new sporting director, manager's not there yet, that means the formal offer for the player has not been made yet. Stay tuned. Couple others who have been linked with moves to MLS. Pachuca striker Franco Jara could move from Liga MX to MLS, according to a report in ESPN Mexico. He's going into the final 6 months of his deal. Pachuca's willing to make a deal to get something in return for him. He scored 59 goals over the past 4+ years for Pachuca. Makes a ton of sense. Another goal scorer, Alan Pulido, Golden Boot winner this year for Chivas. Reports from TUDN that San Jose and former Chivas manager Matias Almeida could be looking to bring Pulido in for a $10 million transfer to Chivas. Could make sense. You get another player in that has played for Almeida, gets the system, was successful in it. We'll see. That's a big outlay for the Earthquakes. And another one when it comes to the Galaxy, Cape Verde forward Dianini. He is reportedly linked to the Galaxy because of an Instagram story that his agent posted. It was a rumor of interest from the Galaxy, and the caption that was added by Dianini's agent was, "It begins." He has scored 21 goals in 25 appearances for Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia, played in Liga MX previously. So those are some of the players that are linked to coming in. There's some other rumors of players who are already in the league. We'll get into that and more on the other side. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here. November 26th, hour number 2. MLS silly season in full bore right now as rumors are coming from Spain, from Colombia, from Saudi Arabia, from Mexico. I'm sure we'll get a few more countries to add to that list here shortly. But we'll get into all of that and more. There are some rumors about moves within the league as well, and let's jump into these, John, real quick. We mentioned the Kemar Lawrence potential for a trade, or at least he's requesting a trade. The Red Bulls are not really interested in doing that. Jake Shapiro of the Denver Post reported yesterday that Drew Moore, center back for Toronto, who's a free agent, set to sign a deal with Colorado Rapids for 2020. He'll be 36 next year. Before that stint in Toronto, Drew Moore spent 7.5 years with the Rapids. He was part of the 2010 MLS Cup title win under Gary Smith. He was captain of the Rapids. He was an all-star selection. When you look at Drew Moore's career, that time in Colorado is the longest point and the point that really stands out. It's a move that makes a lot of sense. I thought there was a potential maybe he would end up in Nashville as a veteran center back to reunite with Smith, but Colorado makes a ton of sense for Drew Moore.
Yeah, you've got a guy who's toward the tail end of his career. He goes back to a place where he's loved, respected by the fans, and so yeah, this made sense on the emotional front, but it also made sense, to have that experience at the back as well as you're trying to build things in Colorado. So, yeah, completely understand where this was going if it does come to pass with Drew Moore in Colorado.
Well, and you're not asking him to start in Colorado because you've added Lalas Abubakar, you've added Austin Trusty, you've got two young center backs that are going to take the bulk of the minutes. To have Drew Moore available when you want to play three in the back, to have him as a veteran component of a roster that Robin Fraser is leading, who is another great center back in his time. Maybe it's the potential for Drew Moore to start working towards a coaching career after the fact. And Robin Fraser was the assistant for Greg Vanney in Toronto as well. So he knows him very, very, very well. Just makes a ton of sense all the way across the board. So be on the lookout for that announcement. Stephen Goff at the Washington Post had some updates. Couple things in his most recent column over at the Post. Multiple Western Conference teams have expressed an interest in acquiring Luciano Acosta. That is one person with knowledge of Acosta's situation telling Stephen Goff. They're going to have to make a trade for his MLS rights, but he would be available. So let's see how that goes. Actually, no, I think Luciano Acosta... Is he listed in the re-entry group? I think... I don't know if he did. I wonder if he opted out of that because I know he's trying to go overseas. Gwen's checking on it for us. We'll see if she comes up with an answer. I'll have to go back and double-check on Acosta's situation. But you could have Western Conference teams interested. Okay, that's number one. DC United and center back Frederick Briant have agreed to a new 2-year deal. A person unauthorized to discuss the matter told Stephen Goff.
Yes.
He's out of contract at the end of the year. More importantly, and this is the one that blows my mind. All right, Bill Hamid, loan is up. You want to keep him. You're going to have to get him to a new deal or make a transfer. They are reportedly about to do that. So DC United, reportedly, according to Stephen Goff of the Washington Post, is about to pay $750,000 to make the transfer happen to get his rights. They've also reached an agreement in principle on a multi-year contract that is likely to make him the highest-paid goalkeeper in the league. All right. DC United's about to spend $750,000 for a player that they developed, that they let walk on a free, that they had to pay to bring back on a loan, and now they're about to pay more to bring them back on a transfer and give him the contract that maybe he didn't even ask for as much. We don't know what the terms were that DC turned down before when they let him walk on a free. But you're going to end up paying a lot more money for Bill Hamid now than you could have previously, it seems like. Maybe he just said, you know what, I'm going overseas. I don't care what you're offering me. I don't want to listen. Nah. And he left. Don't know. Maybe that was the case. Otherwise, it looks really crazy to pay this kind of money to bring a player back that you let walk on a free. I'm baffled.
Although I would like to know if the na-na-na-na-na-na-na is a direct quote from those negotiations.
It could have. If that was the case, if Bill Hamid said, look, guys, I don't care what that piece of paper over there says. I don't care what you're thinking. I'm going to play out my contract, and I'm going to go to Europe because I'm ready to do this. I want to do this. I want to test myself, all the things. Okay. If that's the way it played out, well, then there was nothing DC United could do. If it played out in any other way, this looks incredibly foolish because you're spending money on a transfer for a player that you let walk on a free.
Mm-hmm.
Is what it is. We don't have all the details, so, I mean, if he said, I'm not listening, then okay. Then this just is what it is. And now he didn't, stick in Denmark, and he's making the comeback, and he's going to get a fat contract to do it. He's worth the contract. He's been worth it all along. Just looks very, very, very strange, and I'll be curious to see how this is discussed in DC and discussed around the league. I don't know. No, it's just you're spending more money than you could have spent by spending money the second time around instead of the first time around, and so. Yeah. Okay. Thumbs up from me. Yeah. Question from Eric Englert this morning, going back to our Aberdeen discussion. Okay.
He says, are there any thoughts on an Andrew Carleton loan to Aberdeen? He thinks it could be a good place for him to get out of his comfort zone and focus on soccer.
I mean, sure. It makes a lot of sense. I think, this is something that's going to be debated all the way around about the different levels between MLS and USL Championship and the Scottish Premier League and a club like Aberdeen. Aberdeen's number 3 in Scotland right now in the table behind Celtic and Rangers. Celtic and Rangers spend money like an Atlanta United and like a top MLS team. Aberdeen and below don't. The overall level of the league, I think MLS has passed it. I think seeing John Gallagher go from Atlanta United to consistent starter to a player who is getting time with Aberdeen would lend you to that, that type of conclusion. I don't think it's a dramatic difference either way, and I think you're going to get situations like this where if it's Andrew Carleton, if it's another young player who could potentially go to Aberdeen and get more minutes than they're getting here, well, then it makes sense. If they've outgrown what you're getting with the USL Championship, or if they need that change of scenery to spark something, and I think that's something that you've seen lots of different clubs over the years do, where you have a young player who's coming up and they've had their taste and you have a lot of expectations for them. That move away for a short period of time on loan can do wonders. And, you look back at like David Beckham's career, for example. He spent, I think, 3 months on loan, a very short period of time with Preston North End. And it was something that at first he thought it was, like punishment, like he's being exiled. And it was something that helped him prepare to become the player that he ended up being for Manchester United. You've seen it with plenty of other situations in the history of the game. Could it be something that would benefit an Andrew Carleton? Absolutely. Just that change of scenery, just that change in culture, that change in expectations and having to adapt. Sometimes that can bring the best out of a player. Could it be a fit for him? Potentially. The work permit issue is a thing, and it is something to consider. It is a little different in Scotland versus the Premier League, for example. So, same rule, about 75% of the country's senior international matches over the past 2 years. That's how you automatically get the work permit. Not going to happen. A lot of players who go to Scotland don't get that. So, then it goes to an appeal. The appeal panel is 5 ex-players or managers, and they can grant a governing body endorsement if they think the player would be an asset to the Scottish game. That's a little bit of a crapshoot. I think when you're looking at a player like Andrew Carleton, you're talking about a player who is featured in a Youth World Cup. You're talking about a player who has senior appearances with his club. Is that going to be enough to get that work permit? That's going to be the question, and don't know. It's definitely not a guarantee, and that would be the challenge for players that don't have an EU passport, and that's right now. Does that process change with Brexit? It's very possible, and nobody really knows what that's going to look like. So right now, I think it's still a crapshoot and maybe not a likely scenario because of his lack of an EU passport, as far as we know. But in the future, does it get harder or does it get easier? We don't know.
I didn't know about the tribunal. That's an interesting element in all of this.
It's the same in England. It's just it's a higher bar generally for the Premier League. I mean, you appeal these things all the time. Believe it was Tim Howard that had to go through the appeal process when he went to Manchester United from Metro Stars. And I think he ended up getting approved via the appeal process, if I'm not mistaken. Same process.
Troop's a fan of the appeals process, apparently,
Sure.
This morning. And Brexit.
That's a bold statement you're putting in Trooper's mouth about approving Brexit. So I don't know about that. I don't know if you want to go there.
All right, well, yeah, he's all fired up about Brexit this morning. Any other news and notes? We're caught up on the Twitters.
Yeah, so you're getting a lot of rumors right now, too, as I'm kind of keeping an eye on different things about Ezequiel Barco. The report in Portugal has sparked a lot of conversation because we talked about the sporting aspect of it yesterday, Sporting Lisbon. But in that article, there are also reports that other clubs are keeping tabs on Barco, which is kind of what you do. It's called scouting. It's called having a network. But Arsenal, Manchester United were two that were specifically mentioned. And maybe the Arsenal Twitter folks or the Sun account, I'm seeing more Arsenal retweets from @SunArsenal about their report on it than, is it @Sun MANUTD? Yes. I'm seeing more of the Arsenal than the Manchester United. So are Arsenal fans more excited about this than Manchester United fans? I don't know. It's another one where, I mean, according to the rules of the work permit, he wouldn't get one yet because he hasn't featured for a senior national team. So he'd have to go through an appeals process. Would that happen, or would they then sign them and loan them out? It's a different conversation because you're talking about clubs that spend those types of dollars that it's going to take to sign in Ezequiel Barco on a transfer. But you do have the restrictions when it comes to the work permit side of it. So that creates another issue in it. More importantly, I think it's probably a year early. I really do, as I keep coming around on this. I think there's a lot to be gained for Barco to have a big year with Atlanta this year, play in CONCACAF Champions League, potentially play in the Olympics. And first, Argentina's got to get there and got to qualify. I don't have to go through that process. But for a 20 turning 21-year-old to have that kind of year ahead of them, I don't think there's a rush to get to Europe. Now, you never know. Offers can come in and blow your mind, and that changes the paradigm. But I think he has a big year ahead of him that could set him up and set Atlanta United up and set this potential deal up to be an even bigger one at the end of 2020 as opposed to at the start.
Yeah, no, for me, I've always thought that this season, any talk of any kind of a deal sending him away from Atlanta United was premature. I've always thought that if he continued on the path that he was on, we saw him playing internationally. We saw him take that next step up, playing for Atlanta United when he was healthy, taking those next steps and those next stages. I've always maintained that, yeah, unless there's that deal, that completely and totally blows your doors off, that is 8 figures, and it's a team that's really interested, I think that extra year of development, both with Atlanta United and internationally, would serve him better going forward, unless there's just honestly this team that sits there and wants to empty their wallet and go Scrooge McDuck on you and go Eric Cartman and swim in the dollars for you. But no, I've always thought that it should be after this season unless something happens.
You're getting moves around USL as well, and we're going to have a 1v1 later in the week with Home Sweet Soccer, who Jason from Home Sweet Soccer covered League One in pretty big detail, and I want to pick his brain a little bit about the first year of the league, where he sees it going forward, the types of moves that he's going to be looking forward to. We saw the Connor Antley move from Tormenta to Indy 11. Tormenta has announced they're bringing 10 players back for the 2020 season as they continue to develop. Not a huge surprise that they're going to keep the core of that team together. A lot of the locals as well are going to be sticking around. Pablo Jara is a goalkeeper that I think you do need to keep an eye on. He signed a 2-year deal going into his first professional year, so he'll be going into the last year of his deal. He had a big season. I think outside of Dallas J was a goalkeeper that turned the most heads in USL League One. I'm excited to see now, as you have the League One process, you have the championship, you have players that are going to move throughout these different clubs. Corbin Bone, who was with Cincinnati last year, is going to Louisville this year to play in the championship where he had played for Cincinnati previously. You're going to see players move up and down, and that movement it's great for the player side at this stage because honestly, when you go back in previous years, you didn't have as many options for players at this stage. And I mean, I remember Danny Zatella talking about when the Cosmos went away, he thought about retiring. So you had players, in their mid-20s, late 20s, who just didn't have as many options to play and earn a living. Well, that's grown, and that's a good thing in this game. And now when you have the League One side of it as a either landing spot for players who maybe were overlooked coming out of college, maybe overlooked coming out of the youth game, opted not to go to college, maybe players from other countries who decide, I want to come to the United States and chase this here, and I'll take an opportunity like going to Statesboro or going to Greenville or going to Chattanooga and building a career and building a name for myself. There's more pathways now. And League One and Tormenta and Greenville Triumph and Chattanooga Red Wolves are a big part of that. And I think that would ultimately be the hope that the NISA can be a different pathway at the same type of level of the Division III professional level for players. And the more opportunities that players have to get seen and get noticed in professional environments, the better off the overall game will be in the country.
Yeah, some of the other players that were mentioned that were part of Tormenta keeping their roster, Lars Eckenrode, who was one of the key defenders. Troopers obviously fired up about all the Tormenta folks. Josh Phelps, another key member. Jad Arslan, first player that was ever signed. Lucas Coutinho, and that's a good one too, to hear that Lucas is a part of the core coming back in 2020 with the injury that happened in the Tucson match and his long road to recovery. And Greenville's made a couple of signings that from their core that made it to the last game of the year. So you're seeing these guys, whether they're young guys who are trying to continue to build their games, or the veterans that have found homes. And I think that's been the interesting part of League One. And you've seen that in Chattanooga as well. They've made some player announcements. I think Stephen Beatty's coming back next year, one of their leading goal scorers. So you're seeing the teams in League One building and continuing to hang on to those players as they either look to move away and go to other places, like Connor Antley as an example, or hang out and continue to build what they built in those first years in the League One teams.
It's only going to continue to grow, so be on the lookout for that League One deep dive later this week. Be on the lookout later today for a deeper dive into the Aberdeen-Atlanta United partnership with Derek Ray. That'll hit the network later this afternoon. We're going to take a quick break. If you have Tuesday thoughts for us, tweet at us at @SoccerDownHere. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, November 26th edition. Deep dive into MLS silly season, because that is where we're at right now. Rumors from all over the globe about MLS teams, about players coming to MLS, about players leaving MLS, all kinds of stuff, and that's only going to continue. The next stage is re-entry draft, and that will be this afternoon. Tom Bogert with a piece over at MLSsoccer.com about some players that could be available, and I think these are more players that could be picked today. Remember the difference between the two stages. Today, you're either adding another year to their contract if they're out of contract, or you're picking up their option. So you've got to work with what's already there for these players. Stage 2, you can renegotiate their deal. So if you're looking at players who are on larger salaries in the reentry draft, they're probably going to go in Stage 2. But the names that Bogert drops on you in this MLS soccer piece, Mikey Ambrose is one, and mentions also that Inter Miami traded up for that number 1 slot. Paul McDonough knows Mikey Ambrose from his time with Orlando, from his time with Atlanta. Could that be a player when you look at Inter Miami and what they have and what they might need that would be a good fit for them? Miami, as we are currently discussing, did draft Ben Sweat in the expansion draft. That's the same position as Mikey Ambrose. Now, could you be picking Ambrose for depth? Sure. And if that's what you're thinking of him, then if he backs up Ben Sweat, potentially gets some starts, okay. Could Mikey Ambrose be more than that? I think he could. I think Ambrose is a player who could start in this league in the right situation. I don't know if he is a starting level talent on a top team, but is he a starter for a playoff team? I think so. But with Miami sitting on that number 1 spot and the history with McDonough and Ambrose, It's a fair bet to say, and based off his contract, which is a cap friendly one, that Ambrose could be that number one pick in the reentry draft today.
Yeah, and I know that the Bogert piece had another couple of big names going forward, but does Mikey get this new start? And obviously, you can look at the relationships, and I know that we can sit here and go 1+1 with McDonough and Ambrose. Yes, that means he's going to Miami, or that they're looking at him and he could be the top thing. So, yeah, we can sit here and look at tea leaves and try to put things together. And, it's one of these kind of things where you could sit there and say, Mikey, you'd like to see him get a fresh start because of how well he was loved, respected as a player and as a part of the fabric with Atlanta United. I would think that, everybody in the Atlanta United footprint, if Mikey goes and ends up in a place like Inter Miami, you tip your hat and you sit there and say, go for it, because of everything that he did while he was here.
Sure. I mean, Mikey Ambrose isn't going to be here next year. So, I mean, I don't think anybody has any hope that he doesn't end up in a good place. I don't think that's the situation here. But also, I don't think you're looking at this draft as a best available kind of draft either. And I would caution everybody who's speculating about the reentry draft to not go down that road, because that's not what it is. It's not about picking the best player. It's about picking the right player for what you need, and also picking the player on the right kind of deal that you're comfortable with if you're going to pick them in stage one. A player like Juan Agudelo, for example. Great player. Really talented player. I don't think he's ever lived up to his potential, and he's still only 26. He has all kinds of time to continue to grow and develop and live up to that potential. Maybe it's been the wrong spot. Maybe it's been used the wrong way. I don't know. But he's on a deal last year that paid him over $600,000. Do you want to take a player that hasn't lived up to their potential for that kind of hit in the reentry draft stage one, where you're picking up either their option or signing them to the same number for next year? That's a far riskier situation. Could Juan Agudelo have a bigger impact on a team than Mikey Ambrose? Yeah, absolutely. But when you start factoring in fit and contract numbers and cap hits, he is not as valuable in this draft in stage one as a Mikey Ambrose would be, a player who has started postseason, a player who has played, I think, key minutes for a top team in this league over 3 years, and a player that I think is a little safer to know what you're going to get. Agudelo, you don't know what you're going to get, and you're going to have to pay him a lot more to find out. Ambrose is a very cap-friendly player, and I think he'll be in high demand. He'll go in this reentry draft stage one. I'd be surprised if he doesn't.
And then BWP would be another riskier play because, his salary was close to 1.4 last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's honestly riskier than Agudelo because it's more money and older player and more concerned with injury. So I'd be shocked if he went in stage one because of that. You start looking at players in stage one, and you look at guys that are, I think, a better fit in that sense. Ambrose is the one who jumps out to me, and yeah, part of it is because we've seen him on a regular basis. But scroll through. Connor Maloney is another one who is young, a little bit younger than Mikey Ambrose, a player who can play maybe a little more comfortably on the right side than Mikey Ambrose, a little more versatility that you could get from a Connor Maloney. Less proven, and that's going to be the question mark, but a player who could be valuable in the right setup. Donnie Toya goes into the reentry draft. Donnie Toya played 2,300 minutes for RSL last year. Toya would be a very good fit at 27 years old for a number of teams, and he's on a friendly kind of contract deal. Jonathan Campbell, center back, 26 years old. He played 4 games for the Sounders last year, but center back depth and a player who has played a good bit of minutes in this league in his time in it. Another reentry draft player who could go stage one because it's a friendly kind of deal to bring him in. Shane O'Neill is one who I thought would have been a good signing for Orlando. Didn't live up to it last year. Was good for Colorado before he went to Europe. Is O'Neill a player that you might look at? Kofi Opare, another center back with some experience that goes through the reentry process. Could he be one? Eric Miller is one who's fallen off here in the last couple of years. Only played 329 minutes for New York City. Seemed like Dome Toronto just didn't rate him the same way when he came over, but he's a player who can play on either side of the back line, predominantly a right back, 26. Another cap-friendly kind of deal. You're going to get more defenders here that I think are going to be more appealing at this stage of the reentry draft than the more attack-minded players. Dylan Powers, central midfielder, is another one. There's good potential in it. Kellen Rowe is another intriguing one that's maybe a little bit more of a wild card, because I don't know if we've ever figured out what the best position for Kellen Rowe is. It's not that long ago that he was getting key minutes for the U.S. men's national team in a Gold Cup, and now he's bounced around teams, I think 3 different teams in the last 2 seasons. He goes through this process after not playing a whole lot for Real Salt Lake at the end of last season. He's one that, in the right situation, Kellen Rowe could be a great addition in this reentry draft and really surprise a lot of people. I look at Colorado for a Kellen Rowe, and if they play him as a number 10, he could be a great fit.
Okay, and going through the list, I had a couple of guys that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
From Montreal, Jackson Hamel.
Definitely an unknown. Inconsistent. Had some great moments and had some moments where it's like you keep expecting him to break through and it hasn't happened. Is that down to the managerial changes in Montreal? Is that down to the player? Hard to know. Still potential, but you're getting to an age point that potential starts to wane a bit. So could he be the kind of player that an Atlanta United might be interested in as a reserve? Potentially, yeah. I think he's that kind of player. I think he's that big body that would give you something different. Would he be the right fit? And you have to remember the things that Remy Gard kind of put out there publicly questioning him. That's something that's going to ring some alarm bells for a lot of clubs around the league. And maybe he's a player that it's too risky to pick here where you have commitments on salary numbers, and even in stage 2 where you have to make a genuine offer. Maybe he's one that goes through the whole process but then is in demand for teams to bring him in and talk to him and see, like, all right, what's real and what's not real? What is the true reality of Anthony Jackson Hamel and what he can bring to my team? He might be one that you'd like to talk to in a deeper way first before you take a flyer on.
Okay, and then we're 2 in Houston and 2 in Vancouver that I was kind of buzzing past. In Vancouver, PC and Scott Sutter.
Scott Sutter, 33 years old, right back. Age would be a factor for him. Could he come in and give you a year or 2 potentially? Could he give you much more than that? I don't know about that. And that would be the question mark for him. PC, where's he fit? And that's the question. He's bounced around between a left winger and a left back, and I don't think he's really settled into either one. And that's going back to his time in the old NASL, coming up through with Fort Lauderdale. I think he's a talented player. I don't know who's going to take the flyer on him. I don't know where they're going to take the flyer on him. I don't know if he's a strong enough defender to play left back, and I don't know if he's impactful enough as a left winger to primarily play there. If he's a utility guy, I don't know if you're going to use that pick here because there's better utility options that are more proven. PC's one that will be in the league next year. I just don't know where that's going to be and through what mechanism. If somebody has seen enough of PC that they say, you know what, I think he's being misused as a left back, for example, I'm going to use him as an option off the bench as a left winger. And then I have the potential, if I need a left back, I've got him there. But I'm going to use him as a left winger primarily. There's teams that need wing depth. I mean, there's teams that just don't have a lot of options out wide when you look at the depth charts right now as they currently stand. I mean, I kind of go through. Chicago needs depth everywhere. Cincinnati needs depth on the wings. Scrolling through, Dallas could use some depth at outside back, specifically, and some veteran depth, because Dallas has so many young players that are in those depth roles. They're going to need minutes with North Texas. They're going to need to be loaned down, and you need a veteran who can come off the bench in a tough spot when you need him. Dallas could be a very good fit there. Other teams, LAFC needs depth on the outside. Miami needs depth everywhere. Minnesota needs outside back depth. Nashville needs depth, especially on the wings. New England needs depth on the wings. Continuing to look through, RSL potentially could use some depth there with Sebastian Salcedo leaving. It looks like Salcedo could end up in Liga MX, actually, as he's a dual national. I think he got his paperwork to not count as a foreign player in Liga MX. So Salcedo, it seems like, is going to head to Mexico. You need a replacement there, either a starter or reserve as you shift the pieces around in Salt Lake City. Seattle needs wing depth and outside back depth. Kansas City needs outside back depth and has an opening at left back with Seth Sinovic not coming back. Toronto could use depth at the left wing and the outside back. So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of places that PC could go. It's just, do you want to use a slot on him now where you're kind of locked into the numbers on him? That's going to be the question. And that's, I think, what's going to keep today kind of a small number of players who are picked.
And then the other two guys I had that I was looking at were the two from Houston in Juan David Cabezas and Darwin Surin.
Surin is a solid reserve defensive midfielder, and I think you know what you're getting with him. Juan David Cabezas, if he's healthy, is a very good, not quite best 11, number 6 in this league. He just hasn't been healthy for 2 years now. And 1 year, okay, blip, maybe it changes. 2 years, you have to be concerned. And I don't think you can commit to a starting kind of role. But if you need depth in the holding midfield, Cabezas is a player that you might consider. He's going to take up an international slot, and that's where it's a little bit harder when you start talking about reserve roles for international players. It's just health. That's the number one thing when it comes to him is he going to be healthy enough to contribute on a regular basis? I thought he was outstanding in 2017, and he hasn't been that player for 2 years.
So it seems to me, in listening to all of this and having to juggle the ideas of stage one salary figure plus age and all the other things that you look at when you're trying to bring in players, today seems to be more of a stage two element of guys being picked up than stage one, because you don't want to necessarily have them on their number from last season, but you still might want to have them in-house at a lower point or at a negotiated point.
Yeah, I mean, today is stage one.
Right.
You're not going to see as much action in stage one because of that, because you're locked into numbers. Stage two is where you're picking up rights and you have to make a genuine offer. I think you're even going to see teams wait out the whole process, and then the players are essentially free agents. That's where you'll see a lot of these players move. I think you'll probably see between the two stages 12 players picked overall, maybe 4 today. Just pulling numbers out. I don't think it's going to be a huge amount. The guys that jumped out to me that could be targets when you look at Atlanta United, and I think could be targets today because I don't think Atlanta United's looking at expensive players in the reentry process. Jonathan Campbell, who I mentioned from Seattle, Alex Cronjale, who was a homegrown from Columbus, who just hasn't broken through in Columbus. Both could be reserves at center back and play minutes if needed. Backup forward options. The one who I don't think he's shown everything yet, but I do like his potential. It's another Columbus player, Jordan Hamilton, who came over there from Toronto, but came in at the same time Romario Williams did, and it's like you added two guys who were somewhat similar in what they bring to the table. I think Hamilton has a little bit more potential than Romario Williams at this point, and could be that kind of big center forward number 9 option when you look at it. Other potential options here for Atlanta United. Eric Miller is one from New York City who I mentioned before who can play on either side of the back line. Connor Maloney would be another one if you're looking for a reserve option as an outside back. Would make a lot of sense. R.J. Allen falls into that, but R.J. Allen was out of contract for a long time last year before signing with Philadelphia, so I think you've had your chance to look and decide not to bring him in. Saad Abdul Salam is one who's bounced around a lot here lately. I still think he's a good player. He's a little more limited to being a right-back reserve option, whereas Miller and Maloney specifically give you the option to play on both sides of the back line, which is very useful. So those are the names that jump out to me, and those are the names that seem to be the best fit when you look at what Atlanta United could be looking for today. But I don't think it's all that likely that you see Atlanta pick somebody up, unless there's one of those players that we mentioned or somebody else on the list that they've scouted, they've done the due diligence on, and they like the number that they were on, either the option or the salary last year, and they're comfortable bringing them in on that number for this team, which makes me think that if you see a move from Atlanta today in the reentry draft, it's going to be for a player in more of a reserve role.
I have a question dating back to yesterday. I don't know if you got to discuss it in the first segment of the show. Okay. Did Harris Medunjanin being picked up yesterday surprise you?
Yeah, because it's a player you have to offer. You have to make a genuine offer to him to keep his rights. If you're Cincinnati, I do think he can fit what Ron Jans wants to do in Cincinnati. You look at Jans's background coming from the Netherlands, and you want to be a possession-oriented team. Well, Medunjanin's great in a possession-oriented team. You're going to have to protect him defensively, and everybody's really harped on the defensive side of his game, and I think they've completely overlooked everything that he brought to Philadelphia this year on the rest of it. I mean, you're able to control games with Medunjanin in possession, and Cincinnati would like to get to that point. Are they going to be able to get to that point this quickly and use that to mask his defensive frailties? It's a question. It's a valid one, but a veteran to come in and help set the tone for that team, that's what they need. So I understand it. I get it. It's just finding a salary number that makes sense. And the waiver process is different. It's more like stage 2 of reentry, where you have to make a genuine offer to the player. You're not locked into numbers. So they don't have to sign him on the type of salary he was on in Philadelphia. Maybe you give him a couple of years and divide it up, and he's a lower TAM player for you. That might be more manageable. He played every minute last year. It wasn't like a player that, did he get tired? Did he look a little tired at the end? Sure, they also had a crazy schedule at the end of the season, and they didn't charter anything. So
right.
Maybe that factored in. But Medunjanin played every single minute last year. Could he play significant minutes for Cincinnati next year? Absolutely. And I think he helps that team a lot. I think it's a good pickup. Even better if you get him on a salary number that you're more comfortable with.
that was part of it for me. And then the question of, okay, who does Ron Jans bring in to surround Medunjanin because of what you were talking about defensively? It's like, okay, I like this first step. I want to know what the salary number is, but I also want to know how he's going to be sealed off or protected or whatever phrase you want to use when it comes to his.
You already got guys. You got Alan Cruz. You got Leonardo Bertone. You got Caleb Stanko. You've got plenty of guys who give you that. I mean, Philadelphia did it with Alejandro Bedoya and Jamiro Montero. Neither one are known for being lockdown defenders. So if you play a midfield with either Cruz or Bertone next to Medunjanin or Stanko is more of a true defensive midfielder, you've got plenty of options. You know, if your midfield looks like Medunjanin, Stanko, and Cruz, that's good. That's a good group.
So that was that, like, and that to me, because we had talked about guys like Greg Ranjitsingh as a possibility, and we've seen what he was able to do at Lou City. And I think that having a guy like that who can spell and who possibly could challenge for a starting job at MLS, I like that pickup too. But my biggest question from yesterday was Medunjanin.
I think it can work out, and I don't think you take him number one if you don't have an idea that, all right, this is a player that we've targeted, and this is a player that fits what we want to do. And now it's just finding the right kind of contract that makes sense for it. We're going to take one more break. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Let us know what you're thinking about on a Tuesday. We'll be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Final segment, Soccer Down Here, November 26th. Program and notes for the week. We will not be on Thursday or Friday. We will have some specials along the way. As I mentioned, we'll have a special on the Aberdeen partnership with Derek Ray. That'll hit your podcatchers later today. We'll have a 1v1 with Jason from Home Sweet Soccer covering USL League One and the growth of that league in its first year and then what it looks like down the road. That'll be hitting either Wednesday or Thursday. Any other 1v1s coming on your end, John?
We are chasing, and let's see, I'm trying to think of who I have in the queue of trying to, it's like, this is what happens when you don't have your legal pad in front of you. Obviously chasing the Charleston Battery, chasing some stuff in the NPSL as well. and Oakland City heading into League Two, and chasing after South Bend as well. All the new folks in League Two that are coming to the fore, and seeing what kind of trouble we can get into when it comes to League One, League Two, and the NPSL as we continue to tour the Gulf South as well.
Also, make sure you've got it on your calendars, December 4th at Reformation Brewing in Canton. Those of you guys listening with us this morning are going to be the first ones to hear this, but we will have a special guest with us that night in Canton. Michael Parkhurst is going to be hanging out with us for a little while. Cherokee Soccer Association and TOCA are presenting that, and they will be with us as well. We're raising money for Cherokee Soccer Association on the night. We'll be talking to some reps from CSA, but also Michael Parkhurst will be hanging out with us. Get a chance to talk to him about the camp that he's doing right now with Mike Ambrose, with Alec Can, with Jeff Lorenowitz. A Thanksgiving week camp for young players, and it's something that I think we'll see Parky do more and more of. Curious to see where his thoughts are on, what next looks like for him. Is it going to be coaching? Is it going to be scouting? Is it going to be front office? Is it going to be, just chilling? What does it look like for him? I'd be really excited to catch up with him after he concluded his career. I want to talk to him about that separated shoulder and how crazy that was at the end of the year for him. And just, looking back on a long career, one of the best careers in American soccer. So Michael Parkhurst will be joining us at Reformation Brewing in Canton on December 4th.
I wonder if Parky has slept in, and I put those in quotes because with a family it's a relative term, but I wonder if he's had the opportunity to sleep in since the end of the year.
I would assume that he has. I don't think he's getting up early to train like he has been.
People hopping on a bed, those kinds of things. That's why I put slept in quotes, because I wonder if he got to just not set an alarm. Those kinds of things.
Shiva just tweeted a picture from the camp, actually, where Shiva's child is attending. So there you go. Said it's an amazing camp. The kids love these guys. I hope they do more. I think you'll see more stuff like this. Lawrence Wyke from Atlanta United, too, was doing a camp with Jack Gers, played for Georgia Revolution in the NPSL, player from Georgia Gwinnett College. They're doing a camp. You're going to see more stuff like this. It's really cool opportunities because, one, you're dealing with players who have went through this themselves. So they're trying to gear the week to something that they would have liked to have done when they were a kid. And just the star power of it, just the fact that you're getting a chance to interact with a player that you've watched from the stands. And these are some of those very underrated elements of having a team and building a culture and creating these kinds of opportunities where, kids get a chance to see their heroes up close. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot of power.
And, for me, back in the 1870s when I went to soccer camp, you didn't have, you had some of the old Atlanta Chiefs, and it took for me the opportunity to do a little research to figure out who was there. But you also had some of the younger college guys who were brought in when Philadelphia Textile was a power. That should go ahead and tell you how long ago that was. But it was cool to be able to learn from them, to reach out to them, to sit there and get advice. And as the young kids sit there and go, well, okay, I'm a left-footed guy, and then you invert me. And so it was interesting to learn those kinds of things at a very, very young age, and to be able to reach out and touch your heroes and learn from them. It's stuff that you don't forget.
Yeah, it has an impact on a kid who wants to become a professional. Shiva also asked, or kind of speculated, excited to see who the next young signing for Atlanta is that will potentially draw European interest, playing off of the Miguel Almiron and Ezequiel Barco, interest now that Barco's getting the Almiron move to Newcastle. Who would be next? It's maybe a player that we don't know yet. It could be this young number 6 from Colombia. It could be a player from Argentina. It could be a player from Europe who's coming over here for an opportunity to then go back. It's really open-ended, and that's what's so exciting about where Atlanta United is right now. And I think that's why you get all of these different conversations that are coming at the Atlanta United situation from different perspectives. A club like Sporting Lisbon 10 years ago, if they were interested in one of your players, it's like, ooh, cool. How much? Okay, yeah, this is a great thing. This is great. Now, is that as much of a necessity for an Atlanta United? Do they need to send a player to Sporting Lisbon for that player to realize their full potential? Maybe not. It's changed. Atlanta United is a powerhouse brand in North America, as that brand ranking that we talked about from the Soccer X conference. You're talking about a brand that of the individual clubs in North America is the strongest. Would be the highest ranked individual brand. That's massive. That's crazy. When you look at a club that's going into its 4th year. And it's very important when you start talking about these kind of moves, because it's a brand that has, I think more brand recognition worldwide than maybe anyone outside of the LA Galaxy. And the LA Galaxy have that name recognition maybe more in Europe than Atlanta United does because of the Zlatans, the David Beckhams, the Robbie Keanes. Whereas Atlanta United has that brand recognition and that power in South America because of Miguel Almiron, Joseph Martinez, now Ezequiel Barco, now Pity Martinez. It's a really interesting question that Shiva asks about what do they do next. And I think you will continue to see young talent come in that has resale value and moves on. But I think you'll also see more signings like the Pity Martinez signing. More signings of just top talents. Because you're a club that has the ability to sign top talents. And the next step in that evolution for clubs at Atlanta United's level in Major League Soccer will be to sign top talents from Europe, where, yes, there is more money. And yes, it's a different conversation right now. But can MLS get to that point where they are in the mix for talents who are available, period? Wonder when that's going to happen, because I think it will, just don't know when.
And when you have that article come out and you're looking at the top 20 and you're sitting there and you're reading, and all of a sudden at the end it says, well, if we'd expanded from 20 to 25, Atlanta United would be the team that's on that list. I mean, that's one of those things that makes you sit there and step back a little bit, and you're sitting there going, whoa, what they've done in a very short period of time to get to where they are and build what we've seen and be both a destination and a part of the growth curve. I think that's been a part of the coolness of it as well, is that it's not just one or the other. It is both as you're continuing to develop that worldwide brand. And you're not just a way station, you're a destination. And I think that's been big as well.
I think that's only going to continue to grow, and we'll be talking about it as it continues to grow. We'll be back tomorrow morning for our last show of the week. It's a Well Past Wednesday, so whatever questions you want to throw at us, throw them at us. We won't have stoppage time over at 92.9 tomorrow. We're off until next week for that as well. So all of your questions that you usually throw out at me and at the compadres in the morning or in the afternoon, get them all into the 2-hour block for SDH in the morning. Whatever you would like us to dig into in a deeper way, we're going to have the space to do it. We'll recap anything that happens from reentry draft today. Any other signings that happen, we could start getting free agents that sign deals today. We could start getting guys who, like Diego Valeri, for example, who has reportedly been negotiating with Portland and is very close. Does that deal get done today before the reentry draft? Before that happens and he could technically be picked? Or does he pull his name out of that and say, hey, I'm negotiating, I'm about to do a deal here, and it happens tomorrow? Who knows? All that stuff will be going on during silly season. We'll catch you up on all the latest tomorrow morning on SDH, and be on the lookout for the Aberdeen special later with Derek Ray. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the questions this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be back tomorrow. Mucho plati, y'all.
Mucho plati.